Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Breaking the Game Show. I'm one of the co-hosts here, Stephen Gillespie, and joining me, as he always does, is my buddy Austin Carr. Austin, how you doing, brother?
Hey, what's up, Steven? I'm doing good. I'm happy to have you back. Congratulations. And don't ever leave me again, though. Okay, please.
Well, I'm glad to be back, man. Just for everybody out there, my family, I'll speak on behalf of my family. We appreciate all the thoughts and prayers and everything that went into, my beautiful girl being born into the world on the 30th. It was a great day. Just thank you all so much for all the positive vibes y'all sent our way. It meant the world to us. But Austin, we have a very special guest on the show today,
Yes,
don't
we
we?
do. Yes, we do. It's going to be an exciting show.
Absolutely. Well, let's bring him on then. We have joining us today Mr. Zach Ramey of the Off the Glass podcast. He's the host and content creator for the show. He's a Chicago native. He's a former collegiate player at Benedict University. Did I get that right, Zach?
Yes, you did. Benedictine. Yes.
There you go. And also, you played professionally in Canada, Poland, and Finland. And Zach, you have a mantra that you have on your show that I feel like I've subscribed to for a while, but I couldn't put it as eloquently as you did. Can you please share that with the viewers and listeners?
Of course. Fan of no team, but a lover of basketball. And that's what I like to bring with my content is that just pure content, no hot takes. And that's what I like to bring every time I do an episode.
All right. Yeah. And we've subscribed to that a lot. Austin, you can be a little bit more of a homer than me. You actually like some basketball teams, but
yeah. I definitely a little bit more of a homer, but I just enjoy the game in general as well. But I won't lie that I definitely have my rooting interest.
Mm-hmm. That's all right, man. That's all right. Well, Zach, Austin and I we're pretty new to interacting with you a little bit. I've listened to a few of your shows and whatnot, and we've talked offline on Twitter about different things that we've analyzed as the season has progressed. Will you just share a little bit with the listener, maybe some things that I didn't touch on when bringing you on, a little bit about yourself and just kind of how you like to look at the world of basketball?
You pretty much hit the high points. I'm very proud of my playing career. I think I have a unique story. I'm not saying I'm the only story like this, but kind of started out as a proud child prodigy here in the Chicagoland area. Grew up playing something called small fry basketball, which was huge at the time. Did that, was really good, and then got to high school and didn't play high school ball at all. Played my freshman, sophomore year, no varsity. Really wasn't sure if I was going to continue to play, but one of my friends was going to a junior college in Norfolk, Nebraska called Northeast Community College. It's actually they compete at the D1 level. So I ended up going there, renewing my love for basketball. Actually grew like 5.5, 6 inches my freshman year. So I went from like 5'7" to the height I am now.
That helps.
Yeah, definitely helps.
Awesome.
And renewed my love, and wasn't the best student. I always, like to be transparent. So the D2 offers I had a couple D1s, but a lot of NAIA D2 type things. So I just decided to take a year off, get my grades up, and I ended up going to Benedictine. It's a Division III school. 2 years there. We were really good, went to the national tournament. Kind of a solid program. I'm not going to say a D3 power, but definitely a competitive program. 3 years, might be 5 years ago now, they actually went undefeated and then lost in the championship game to one of those Minnesota teams. But then from there was the minor league route. A lot of these leagues don't exist no more, but the ABA was my first professional job, first time earning money playing basketball. Then from there was the PBL, which was the Premier Basketball League. That has since splintered off into a lot of different things. Mainly the Canadian teams took their teams and formed their own league. So played for the Rockford Fury in the PBL, played in Halifax, Nova Scotia for the Halifax Raymond in the PBL. Then from there was like a cup of coffee in the top league in Poland, and then 2 years in the second league in Finland. And then just decided to kind of just walk away from, I was kind of disappointed a little bit, not going to lie, but, life moves on. I was turning 30. At the time, my dad had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, so we wasn't sure what the prognosis was going to be. I mean, he's doing well now, but just a lot going on. So, I decided to walk away, man. But at the end of the day, like I said, I played at a high level. I knew I was good enough. That's why with my takes, sometimes I try to be, speak to the player a little bit more, speak to the business side, because there's a lot of things that go on, I think, at the professional level that the average fan doesn't realize. And it's not always about who's the best player, if that makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of great guys. And, like I said, proud of my career from Chicago, highly competitive. During my era, I was one of the, best guards in my area, one of my city, competing in the Pro-Am, playing up against guys like, I mean, one year I played against Gilbert Arenas when he was still like Arenas.
That's cool.
Time, and the city that produced during that time when I was playing, like D Brown from that Illinois team, Luther Head, Jamal Crawford would come through and play. I mean, I got stories for days. So very proud of my career, man. So that's just to kind of give a little bit more detail of the type of player that I was.
Nice, well, we're proud to have you on the show, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely. I didn't realize you were from Chicago. You mentioned D Brown. My mom actually went to the same high school he did. I mean, years before him, but she's from that same area.
Yeah, Proviso East and nearby Maywood. Some basketball power. Doc Rivers, Mike Finley. Yeah, real good school. Yep.
Familiar names to say the least, right? I mean, if you know anything about basketball, that's where a lot of them folks come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't even name like Shannon Brown, Sterling Brown, Stephen Hunter that went to DePaul, played in the league. So yeah, I mean it's one of those traditional basketball powers in the Chicagoland area. So a lot of great basketball from this area. Yeah, definitely proud of that.
Excellent stuff. Well, since you're the expert on the show, then man, we'll turn it over to you. But we're gonna talk about the erratic nature of this season so far, and it's I mean, we'll just be real here on the show. You like to be transparent. I do as well. People aren't really happy with the way that the game is being played right now. But, Zach, we're not here to necessarily, talk about if you're right or wrong for feeling that way. We just wanted to have you on and, talk about how we got to be where we are. So, I mean, through your lens, man, through the way that you look at basketball, how do we get to where we are today?
I think what we're underestimating that we are all still human beings, because I've been listening to a lot of different people, just curious. I don't always want to just give my takes because, to be honest with you, I've been trying to figure out why there's been so many blowouts. I mean, I'm talking about bad blowouts, 40-point blowouts. I know it's on the rise. I haven't looked it up, but I'm almost positive it has to be more than last year or even in years past. And I think it has to be the virus. I don't. We're all in some form or fashion creatures of habit. So it's like, we're going to show up and play in these big empty arenas and we're going to try to play off the emotion. I thought the games might be a little bit better because technically they shouldn't be going out. Everything is very limited. So the focus should be there. But I don't know, man. I think as a fan, I'm just trying to tell people just kind of hang in there and just be patient because I think they're still trying to adjust and figure out how we're going to navigate this. It's one thing to be in a bubble, right, and playing the same arena, but now it's like we're traveling again. This state has different rules. I mean, I heard Doc Rivers come out and say he was nervous being in Florida because everybody was walking around kind of with no mask. It's all kinds of different things going on. So that's the only thing I think of that makes sense is that these are human beings as well. And until we get where we're going to be as far as the virus and vaccines and trying to get some, cohesion as a country, I think the sports is going to suffer in some part until we really get to that reset, I believe, going into next season.
Yeah, and those are all fair takes. And just real quick, my dad decided to chime in and said that Gennaro Pargo is from that Chicago area. I know Patrick Beverly is as well. We're Arkansas fans, being from Arkansas. So, you guys have definitely helped our program.
They actually tore down Gennaro's old high school. It doesn't exist anymore. Roberson High School in the heart of Inglewood on the south side. Pat Bev went to Marshall on the west side, which has one of the best women's program as well. Kathy Pondexter comes out of Marshall High School. So, great basketball in Chicago, man. Yeah, no question.
No doubt. Well, Austin, I know that you're extremely plugged in, and you and I kind of share the same wavelength where we like to know the whys as to, why things are happening in the league. So, Austin, I know that you've been digging up and researching, man. What have you kind of come up with this to describe why we are where we are?
Well, in terms of the big giant blowouts, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak to that as much, but I think in terms of like these teams that everybody was expecting to struggle versus the teams that everybody knows are going to be there at the end of the year or thinks they are, the Lakers, the Mavericks, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Miami Heat, those guys, a lot of those teams were just playing last September. Teams like Atlanta and like Cleveland and Sacramento, it's been, the season started 2 weeks ago. The season last year was suspended 299 days ago today. So they just started playing in the NBA again 2 weeks ago. So 280 some days they had off in between games versus they're playing against teams that had 75 days off in between games.
That's just regular season. That's not taking into account the preseason where a lot of these same players were playing too. So you're talking about even even closer than that for some of these guys as well.
Exactly. So I think a lot of it is just we're seeing guys that are just one, there was no preseason, so the new guys that are coming into the roster, there's no continuity. They've never hardly played against each other.
Mm-hmm.
There was no summer league for any of the rookies to kind of get acclimated. And this rookie class, it was not heralded from the get-go, but they've struggled big time, I think, this year, more than in years past. There hasn't really been a whole lot of real standouts. And one of the only ones is James Wiseman. And, we haven't hardly seen him play a game in 2 years. He's played three or four games before he started in the pros in like almost 2 seasons. So I think a lot of it is just these guys don't know how to play with each other yet. And some of these other teams that everybody expected to be down had a lot more time to get prepared. They aren't going to be as tired, whether or not they're tired or it's just, burnt out probably. Or like Zach said, they're creatures of habit. These guys are used to having that time off and then ramping things back up a certain way. And that's all been sped up. So I think it's a variety of factors. I think there's definitely lots of different reasons why this has been going on.
Yeah, and Zach, real quick, I just want to cover some dates, and I'll throw it right back at you and kind of get where you think about this. So the 2018-19 season, which was the season that preceded the one that we just finished, right? It ended on June the 13th of 2019. The next season picked up on October the 4th, and that was the preseason. So you're talking about a total of 113 days. And that kind of typically mirrors what an average period between the end of one season and the beginning of the next happens, is roughly 113 days. Well, after the season was paused and it resumed at the end of July, it didn't end until October the 11th. Now, the preseason started on December 11th, right? So you're talking about a total of only 61 days, roughly half the amount of time that players have to recover, have to, heal from injury and, get their legs back underneath them. And then two, the player movement, building chemistry and cohesion and understanding a playbook and how to play alongside one another. Zach, when you hear those dates and those time frames, obviously that has to speak to a little bit of the erratic nature at the beginning of this year.
Oh, no question about it. I think we're all kind of just hitting on everything, right? Because it's not usually just one thing with anything in life. So we're all kind of hitting on all the points. So I agree 100%. I also want to add too, I think because the rookies didn't have any summer league, no inter camps. And again, everybody lived in different states and we just assumed these were NBA guys. So they must have been sneaking to a gym. But just some of the things I know and talking to different people, certain people didn't get to work out all the time like we think. So I think that's a factor. And then I also think coaches are leaning on their veterans more, guys that have been there. And then let's kind of just work the rookies in slowly but surely. But then certain rookies had to play because of injury. So like Peyton Pritchard is getting great minutes because Kemba Walker's out. So, you have different types of scenarios, but I think we're all just hitting it right on the head as far as the different things that has gotten us to this. That's why my original point, if you're a true fan of the game, if you really love the game, I don't care if it's even in an NFL or college, I think we all just need to be thankful in a way that we were able to play some sports. Let's kind of figure this out, be patient with the players and everybody involved, and then let's wait for this reset, But I think we're all speaking to the factors that's causing this right now.
I didn't even really think about what you just said about, guys different and living in different states and, the ability to get to a gym or not. Like Steven and I are on, Off the Ball Network, and our president, Chris LeBron, he's from New York City. And we talked to him about it. And he said, you can't find a hoop anywhere there. Like they took down the rims and locked up all the basketball courts
in Chicago.
And then I live in Indiana, and every single driveway has a basketball hoop. So it's just, you can go anywhere and play basketball here still. Like they closed down gyms for a month or so, and that was about it. So it's different all over the world. So I just thought that was interesting. I never even thought of that.
Yeah. And again, here in Chicago, like I know of guys that they might have had access to one gym. Then somebody found out, and then they closed that gym. It's just, it's been kind of one of those fluid situations. So I think we're all, like I said, hitting the nail on the head of what's really going on right now.
I can see just behind you, for the people who can't, see right now, you have a hoop directly behind you, so I know you're probably keeping your stuff straight with that golden rim I see back there.
You know
But,
what? I'm afraid it's gonna fall off the wall. So like I haven't since I hung it, even though it came with little Nerf hoops and stuff, balls. But I'm kind of afraid it's gonna fall off the wall. We're renovating the studio, so I'm kind of piecing things as it comes in right now.
Well, it looks good, man.
Nice.
I like the Ali. That's a historic image, for anybody who loves sports. Is a historic image.
Yes.
But I want to just touch on something real quick. We're talking about the level of competition in the NBA right now, and Zach, I took the liberty of myself to go through and calculate this, and I just want to share something with you and kind of get your initial thoughts. So I went through and looked at the average margin of victory from this season and last. Like I sat down with my pen and paper and I wrote down scores and broke out my calculator and tried the best that I could to do Arkansas style math for this. Right. So here's what I figured out. That the previous season, right, not last year, but the year prior to, during the first week of that season, the average margin of victory was 10.4 points, right? And now people are complaining about how, uncompetitive the games are now. They are speaking a little bit to what's actually happening, because at the beginning of this season, right, the beginning of that, the first week of this season, the average margin of victory is 14.19 points. So you're talking about almost a 4 point, per game average margin of victory. So with, the way that the good teams have finished playing at a later date, obviously, compared to, the almost, 9 months that the bad team, the Elite Eight that didn't make the tournament, right? That didn't make the Orlando bubble, is crazy just to imagine how 4 points difference per game has actually amounted to, like a 51 point blowout that the Dallas Mavericks put on the Los Angeles Clippers, right?
Yeah. That was, I think though, the ones have been so glaring, because I thought the number would be bigger than that, to be honest with you. Like I've watched a lot of these games, but just using perspective, I've watched some great games too. So just a matter if you have league pass or not. I just think some of the games that have been on primetime slots or different things have been just so incredibly lopsided, especially like that Miami-Milwaukee game.
Oh, man.
Right, when
that was rough.
It just came out like a house on fire and just made everything they threw up. So, I mean, again, we could say all this other stuff, but then we also got to look at it. Well, Milwaukee got hot. Like, they'll never shoot like that. Again, that was just one of those performances. So, again, the numbers and everything, I think is going to kind of balance itself out. But like I said, again, if you're consuming the game like how I do, there's been some great games. Like now, I was watching Washington and Brooklyn. That was a really competitive game that's going on right now.
Yeah, there's definitely been, lots of good basketball on for sure. I think one of the ones that I just watched the other night it might have been last night. It was Cleveland and Atlanta. That was a really good game. Cleveland came back and won by 3 points. Just earlier today, Boston just beat Detroit 122-120. And, that's not normally a game where you'd think, this game came down to the last minute, but it really did. It came down to the very, very last 20 seconds of that game.
And so it was competitive all the way through, too, didn't it? I thought it was a really good game. It shows having Blake Griffin back on the court. We know he's kind of not what he used to be, but just having him back out, how Detroit looked a little bit more in sync and stuff. So, that was a really good game. I enjoyed watching that game.
I was actually thinking to myself just about an hour before we came on, right at the end of that game, I was like, man, if you could have told Detroit fans a decade ago that they'd have Derrick Rose and Blake Griffin on their team, how happy would they be?
Right.
That's where they are.
Yeah, that's a fact. Yep.
Well, they also have about 8 other centers on that team too, and we saw that kind of flush out during the offseason. But Zach, I want to talk to you too. We just keep saying it. It's been an erratic start to the season. I don't know if you've had a chance to see what the standings are right now in the Eastern and Western conferences, but it's
just in case, because I figured you might ask me that.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll roll through it. And as of, last night is when I updated it. I know a couple games have been played since, but I'm just going to speak to where they were last night. In the Eastern Conference, the 76ers were number 1. The Pacers were number 2. The Orlando Magic were number 3. The Cleveland Cavaliers were number 4. The Atlanta Hawks 5th. The Brooklyn Nets 6th. The New York Knicks are 7th. And then the Boston Celtics were the 8th seed. And just looking all the way down at the end of the list there, the Washington Wizards are 15th, and they just added Russell Westbrook. And a lot of folks, even one here on the show, that the Washington Wizards would get off to a really hot start, right? So it's just in the Eastern Conference, it's just so crazy to imagine how many of these teams that that are either standings or even just a game back were a part of that delete 8 that we just talked about earlier, right? That didn't play in Orlando. Like 22 teams got the phone call and said, hey, come down to Orlando and play. A bunch of the guys that are in the standings right now didn't even make that trip, Zach.
Yeah, and you also have to look at it. So, I mean, if we're honest, we're surprised at what Cleveland and the Knicks by far, right? But if we're fair, Orlando kind of kept their same team. So chemistry as far as their main players. Philly kept their, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. Indiana, you add Sabonis, who missed because of the plantar fascia injury. So some of the teams, if we look at it, they kind of kept their chemistry. We might be as surprised at how high they are, but I think we'll all agree that those were and still should be playoff teams. Washington, I was surprised that they lost, but I'm not surprised that I was one of the people that were just like, when I heard the trial, I was like, I guess, and it wasn't a knock on Westbrook or Wall. I just felt like Washington was in a rebuilding mode. And I looked at the roster, and to me, it was obvious. I'm like, this roster does not suit Russell Westbrook's strength, especially this stage in his career as a declining athletic guard that relies on his athleticism. So Washington, I'm not too surprised. I was surprised at some of the games and how they lost them, but I'm not too surprised that I didn't think they were going to come out on fire, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Austin, what do you make of this Eastern Conference? And you're the one here on the show that I was alluding to that had,
really, I had no idea. Yeah, no, I moved them into the bottom of my my Eastern Conference playoff picture when they made that trade. I was pretty excited about it. I just thought it'd be fun to see Westbrook and Beal together, and I do still think it's fun to watch. And I'm not certain that they're going to be out of the playoffs now. I mean, they obviously are really struggling, but I didn't think they'd be at the top of the East. But just the overall conference, standings are pretty wild. I had the Pacers pretty high. I didn't have them second, but I was pretty confident in them. They've got a deep team, and they got a lot of good guys that can score the ball. They play defense well. I was looking forward to seeing what they look like with their new coach, and I like what I see so far. The Cavaliers are definitely the biggest surprise for me, like bar none. I didn't expect really anything at all from them. I have always been kind of higher on I can't think of his name now. So, I've liked him a lot, but for a long time. But I never really, I was worried that he was going to be a bust. But I also think sometimes nowadays it seems like people, give up on these young players so soon. He's in his third year now, and he's finally starting to figure it out. That's pretty normal.
And he's playing for the Cavaliers. I mean,
yeah, the Nets. The Nets. We knew the Nets would probably make the playoffs this year, but down at 6th right now is a little surprising, especially considering how good KD looks. I kind of didn't think that they'd struggle much if he was the KD that we're used to. And I do have to share this. There was a guy in one of the groups I'm on Facebook that posted his Eastern Conference predictions before the season. And he had the Knicks in 7th and the Celtics in 8th. And people absolutely dragged him, like just made so much fun of him. And finally, all he did, the final comment, he's like, I'll see y'all in March. And that's all he said. And so far, he doesn't sound so crazy. We'll see if it stands up. But I just thought that was kind of interesting and wanted to share that. So it's been crazy. I like the 76ers. I've been saying for 2 years, if they have the talent, if they put it together, they're going to be a tough team to beat. So that's not as much of a surprise, but it is still early. So
absolutely,
so you're high on the 6. I'm one of those guys that think they need to part on it.
Yeah,
I talked about it in my last podcast. I just don't think it will work. And I was watching them play, and my theory is because of the rules. Because you have defensive 3 seconds, I just don't know how your best player, your ball dominant player in Ben Simmons, who is reluctant to shoot for whatever reason. I'm not one of those guys that feel like forcing him to shoot. And then you have a dominant post. I just don't know how that works when you need the court spread because of the way we can zone up and double. I mean, it works in Denver because why? Jamal Murray can shoot. And then Jokic can step out too. But early on, just from my observation, they've been making shots. They've been playing well. They've been defending. But all they've done is just switch Ben and Joel. So now Joel's kind of floating around on the perimeter more and Ben's on the block. And it's like, I'm one of those people that when I see really good teams, I don't get too wrapped up in the regular season. That makes sense. I'm trying to see, all right, how does this look when they get to the playoffs? You know, they want to make an Eastern Conference Finals run. They want to make a Finals run. And the way it's constructed, I can kind of see the same thing happening again. And then also, too, I wanted to clarify, it's not that I didn't think the Wizards would not make the playoffs, but people in my group, you know, I follow different people. People were like 4th and 5th seeds. And I was like, no, I said at their best 7th. Because I was trying to
9th coming into the year. I said 9th.
Okay,
I think I put them at 7th.
All in the same boat with that. I was like, do you realize all those other teams made the playoffs last year? Like Brooklyn made the playoffs without KD and Kyrie. So it's technically what? One spot up for grabs, and that's everybody was assuming it's Orlando. So
and the rest of that team is so inexperienced too. You know, it's really hard for the expectations to fall on Russell Westbrook. For one, it's not even his team now. You know, Bradley Beal still the man in the building. So Russ has to come in.
Do me a favor. Go look at that roster. Just like don't watch them play. Just go read the names on the roster and tell me how many guys do you really recognize. And then I will put into context why I felt like I felt on trade day. I mean, it is what it is. Look at Mo. What's up, Mo?
Mo, Chris, appreciate y'all coming in and saying hey.
Definitely.
I was listening to their show earlier, but then they started to give takes that I knew we might talk about. So I turned it off real quick because I don't want to feel like I'm taking somebody else's takes, but I did tap in a little bit to their show earlier.
No, I did too. I thought that they stole my show notes, but it's all good. I mean, that just means we're all smart on the network. That's all it means.
Yep.
That's all it means.
We all cheat off you, Steven.
Absolutely. All right, well, guys, let's float over to the Western Conference now. As of last night, the Valley Boys, the Phoenix Suns, were number 1 in the Western Conference. The New Orleans Pelicans, number 2. The Los Angeles Clippers, 3. The Lakers are 4. The Utah Jazz were 5th. The Portland Trailblazers, 6th. The Houston Rockets, 7th. And then the Sacramento Kings, 8th. And how about this, guys? The Denver Nuggets are dead last in the Western Conference. Zach, how do you, again, like, can you do your best to explain why it is the way that it is right now?
See, I think in the Western Conference, what we've seen a product of, besides all the other things, is like for the Mavs, Porzingis is out, right? So he's their clear second option, and that team was built around Luka and him. So you have a bunch of other guys, and I always try to tell people, no matter if it's a second option guy or first option guy, or even like that fifth guy, if they're out, that means more people have to play more minutes than they're normally not playing. And I think that's what's going on in Dallas. They're got guys that have to fill those shoes that's not necessarily their role. Denver, I was nervous because they basically said, we're ready to go with our future offensive star, Michael Porter Jr., and we're going to swap out defense and experience. So we let Plumlee walk. We let Jeremy Grant walk, even though he wanted a bigger role. And then we let Torian Craig walk, who hasn't played for Milwaukee yet. And when I watched Michael Porter Jr. play last year, the cool thing about the bubble was they had like that floor camera. So for somebody like me, I was able to see the game through some of these guys' eyes, which was pretty cool. And it clicked. I watched him on like 2 defensive possessions. And I was just like, wow, like he just doesn't know. Like this is a little bit deeper than just effort. I'm like, wow, I don't think he's ever been asked to make these kind of reads. And you can just tell he's just lost. So now what you see from Denver, and then Jamal Murray back to being inconsistent. Jamal Murray. I mean, he had a good game last night, and you know that Phoenix, thanks to Chris Paul, I'm just glad he's just showing everybody why you can't just look at great players through this championship or bust lens. But
he needs his flowers, man.
It's that game last night. Real quick, if I must, like I was charting it on Twitter. And they had 2 possessions when they went back-to-back to Devin Booker, kind of isolations. One was a turnover, offensive foul. The other was like a step-back 3. Then Chris Paul was like, okay, all right, we're going to come down. We're going to run a set, get everybody. I think the ball went off Aiden's foot. They take it out. They end up getting a basket, and then they kind of got back in control. Then he came down again. We're going to run another set. I'm going to get in this mid-range and get a wide-open shot for him and knock it down. It just shows how he has them playing. And then their defense, I looked it up today. I think they're like either 8th or 6th in defensive rating. And those of us who really watched, not just the bubble, but watch Phoenix play because I was a huge Devin Booker guy. Aiden was coming along throughout the season. Like once he came back from the suspension and started getting comfortable, he was playing much better. So I think the Western Conference is a little bit different as far as certain personnel moves and guys being out is why we've seen some of the influx, some of the inconsistencies that we've seen out West.
Yeah, Austin, go ahead, man. What do you think?
Definitely. I think his point about the injuries is definitely big. Denver, he hit it on the head again. They can't guard anybody. I mean, they've already got Jokic, who's a little bit. He's smart. He knows the game well enough. You can tell his IQ when he's really thinking. He can put himself in good position to kind of be a better defender. But if he gets out of position at all, he gets beat every single time.
Yeah.
And Murray's not a lockdown defender. Gary Harris Jr. is a decent defender, but he's always kind of underwhelmed for me. Michael Porter Jr., like he said, he doesn't seem like he really knows where he's at or where he's supposed to be. And I heard this the other day on the radio, and I've always kind of felt this way. Everybody acts like this, like when you go to college is when you get all this great coaching and get taught the game. And like NBA coaches just have to manage egos. Like I don't know, obviously, from a first person perspective, but I would think that's probably not true. I think
someone here on the show does, though. So
exactly. So I kind of want to get his thoughts on that. But I do think that these guys coming in with the 1 year in college, or sometimes like he played 10 games before he got hurt, and depending on where they go to school, it makes a difference too. But I think a lot of these guys come into the NBA with really not nearly as much of a clue on defense, at least, than we really think they do. So I think that's definitely part of it.
Zach, what are your thoughts on that? Just the 1 year in college.
No, Austin is right. I mean, again, the easiest thing I always try to tell people, don't get caught up whether you've experienced like basketball at that level or not. Just think about any job or anything you've done in life. How were you the first day or the first year of just learning a new skill? It's the same thing in basketball. So if you show up and maybe remember, he was the number one player in high school, like by far, like it wasn't even close. And if you go back and watch, I can already tell, and then I talked to a couple other people that's from the area, he never was asked to do that. Like he was never asked to play defense ever. And then you go to Missouri, you get hurt. That wasn't really the focus for him anyway. So some of these guys, when you get to the NBA, it's a lot of rotations. It's a lot of principles. It's a lot of knowing tendencies. It's a lot of, we look at the synergy stats, and that's the analytics part that people don't talk about that always existed. It's the scouting report, knowing strengths. And certain colleges do better jobs than others, but it also is predicated on how long you've been there. So when I tell people this, just imagine any job or any skill set that you have and think about how you were those first couple years. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Austin, you talked about the lack of defense on the Nuggets, and Zach, you touched on it too. They kind of got by with Paul Millsap being that, unsung hero on defense, kind of being that anchor. And you can only ask for, an elder statesman of the NBA to keep being that on a team full of young guys who they want the rock in their hand and they just want to shoot the ball. He can't carry that team. And we're seeing it now, especially with the deep run that they just sustained in the playoffs last season. Right. So that's asking a lot out of Mr. Paul Millsap, who, they were lucky enough to re-sign him. Imagine how terrible they would look if he ended up wanting to go to another team, right, Zach?
Yeah, and to your point, again, my last theory of how now he has to guard certain guys longer than he had to because Jeremy Grant might be taking that. Plumlee might, Torian Craig with his versatility, being able to guard 1 through 4. And again, I always thought Gary Harris would tease you with his two-way ability, but the shooting, I looked it up the other day, I think he's shooting close to like 15 or 20% from 3.
Yeah.
They've drafted really well, but again, you could put as much offense you want on the court. It's just like playing open gym at your local Y or your local fitness center. You still need guys that's going to defend and rebound and do those quote-unquote simple things to kind of fill out what the roster is going to be. And right now with Denver, I don't know if it's going to – I think they'll make the playoffs, but I don't know how it's going to, really come together. I think Phoenix is here to stay because the way they're playing and they got such a cushion. I don't see them ever having a spurt this year, barring injury, where they'll lose more than 3 or 4 games in a row. I just don't – I don't see it happening. Mikal Bridges playing well. Crowder, that's another guy.
Great get.
Just a glue guy. Shout out to Campaign. You know, had a slice of humble pie, had to go to the G League, kind of get it out the mud again. And he's back looking like that aggressive scorer that he was coming out of college. And again, Chris Paul is just going to help Devin Booker make the all NBA team. I said that coming into the season, and we're going to really see once and for all, because I put that poll up, you know, everybody just runs with Tatum and Ingram and Mitchell. And it's like, no, I think Booker is the cream of the crop out of that group right there. And we're seeing it right now.
Yeah, I've always been really high on Booker.
You know, on a later show, I'm on Team Tatum. I love Tatum. Austin will give you that, but I will speak real quick. Booker is an outstanding player. Not to take anything away from him at all. So there you go. Go ahead, Austin.
Just think about the last 4 or 5 drafts. I mean, with Devin Booker, Brandon Ingram, Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell, Luka Doncic, Trae Young, DeAndre Ayton's coming into his own. I mean, there's so many good young players from the last 2, 3, 4 drafts. It's just unreal. So that's exciting. One other thing I did want to bring up real quick. Zach, you said something about go check out the roster of the Washington Wizards. I looked at it just now, and there's at least 6 guys on here that I don't think I've ever even heard of before.
Yeah, seriously. And I mean, I myself
honestly,
on basketball.
Honestly,
I didn't know who these guys were.
Just like they're not playing
I recognize just about all, but there's 3 or 4 at the end that I've never seen before. I mean, I've never heard their name, never seen their face, and that's like you said, that's rare that I've never even at least heard of a lot of those guys. So I get what you're saying there for sure. With Denver, we talked about this on the last show, Steven. I know you listened, but you weren't on. But Denver, to me, I think they've lost a few really close games. They're right in all these. They're right on the cusp of winning all these games. And you hear about it in football, how it's a game of inches or a bounce here and there. Mm-hmm. That kind of seems like how it's been for them. So I'm not super worried that they're not going to make the playoffs or something like that. It doesn't scare me as much as like Toronto, who's, taking the most threes in the league and like 28th in 3-point shooting right now, or 25th or something crazy. And they're like dead last in turnovers. They're not rebounding the ball. Like they're just a mess all over, it seems like, in ways that I didn't expect. So, Denver's still got some star players. Jamal Murray's, probably not going to be what he was in the bubble all the time. That's hard to do. That was quite a crazy run that he made. But they've got to work on their defense and figuring something out on that end if they want to be just a little bit here and there. I think they could have turned some of those games around.
Yeah, I mean, from what I just heard you say, is they were a couple of defensive stops away, right? Like that's right. What they mm-hmm. were from a couple of those victories, and I think around the horn we all kind of agree to that. Well, Zach, I know that you said that you needed to go at about this point in the show.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, I just want to give you an opportunity to kind of promote yourself and the work you do and where the people can find you on social media.
No problem. First of all, thanks for having me on the show. You guys do a great job over here. Like I said, I'm glad you reached out because I wasn't familiar with everybody on the network. Me and Chris have been following each other for a while, and I've been on his show, been on Mo's show. So thanks for inviting me on. First of all, you can follow the Off the Glass podcast, available on all streaming platforms. Like I always say, there's no excuse why you shouldn't be consuming this dope content. The YouTube channel is the Off the Glass podcast. The website is www.offtheglasspodcast.com. It's free to subscribe. When I first started, I did a lot of writing, so I'm about to get back into writing a little bit more. The Patreon page is the Off the Glass podcast. Costs you $5 a month to subscribe, or $60 for the year. This year, I'm going to be adding more video content. So those video breakdowns that you see me throw out on Twitter, I'm going to start throwing those on my Patreon page. So when people support me, they can actually get some tangible as well. So the social media, Zach at the Off the Glass, for Twitter, Zach at the Off the Glass, and for Instagram is Zach the Off the Glass podcast. So thanks for having me on, fellas. I really enjoyed my time. Let's do this again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for coming on, man. We'd loved having you. It's been a lot of fun. It's really cool to kind of get your insight from, a little bit different perspective than what Steven and I bring for sure. So we really appreciate having you on.
Yeah, man. Much love. Appreciate you coming on, Zach. We'll talk soon.
All right. Talk soon. Peace.
Yes, sir. Good. Well, Austin, I mean, Mr. Zach Ramey of the Off the Glass podcast.
That was fun. That was cool. I didn't know much of his backstory until you had said that you'd been talking to him about coming on. I was able to kind of do some research into it. So he's definitely a pretty interesting guy. I was glad we were able to have him.
Yeah, I mean, just being able to look at the game the way that we do now. I mean, Austin, we've played basketball, obviously, but nowhere near the amount of experience or level of competition compared to what our buddy and new friend of the show, Zach Ramey, had.
I had a lot in common on it with him when he got up to the point about where he didn't play varsity high school basketball, but after that, when he played college, I made it my freshman team. That was about it.
Well, there you go. I mean, and that's more than what a lot of people can say. So you can hang your hat on that and be proud of that, because in the grand scheme of things, the higher up you go, the harder it is to make. So
it's crazy though. Some people's stories are just so much different. I have a friend who he did play high school basketball, but our senior year, I think he averaged 4 points a game. Got one offer to play at a D3 school, went there for a year. Moved back home, didn't play for a year, and then he ended up in an NAIA school. In his last year, his senior year, he averaged like 19 points a game for them. He went and played overseas, and I think 2 years ago, he averaged 25 points a game in the league he was in. So, it can happen at any time for anybody, really.
Yeah, and again, he was great to have on. So, Austin,
sure.
we talked a lot about the erratic nature of this game, and just the crazy things that have happened so far this season. I shared a tweet on the Twitter. I'm 30 years old this year, so I need to start practicing saying stuff like the Twitter, putting the in front of everything, right?
Yeah, the Facebook and the Twitter.
Yeah, the Walmarts, right, and all that fun stuff, right? So, but I put a tweet out there just to kind of speak to how my brain was processing the erratic nature of this season, and I put out the Hornets have beat the Mavs blew out the Clippers beat the Lakers beat Miami in the final, Miami has beat the Bucks, the Bucks have lost to the Knicks have lost to Indy lost to Boston lost to Brooklyn, and Brooklyn lost to Charlotte. And then I shared, a Jim Halpert from The Office. If you're familiar, there was a scene in one episode where he's like, "What is going on?" Like, that's just how I feel right now, and I still feel that way to this day. And it's some days later.
Well, I didn't see that until you put it on our show notes. I thought it was pretty funny though. I just kind of was looking at it and thinking, in the Western Conference right now, we've got 1, 2, 3 teams if the season ended today that would make the playoffs that didn't last year. In the Eastern Conference, it's I think 3 at least. It might be 4. So, almost half of the playoff teams right now are teams that didn't make the playoffs, or, all but I think all of them equal also, except maybe the Nets didn't even make the bubble. So, it's crazy to see the difference from last year to this year up to this point. And then, to the blowouts, have just been nuts. There's been more big, huge, margin of victory than I've ever remembered seeing. And, right now I have the stat leaders pulled up, and, obviously James Harden's first in the league in scoring, and he's always up there. And then Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, Trae Young is 4th. CJ McCollum is actually the 5th leading scorer in the NBA this year, 28 per game. Jaylen Brown is 6th. You got Colin Sexton at 9. I just think,
Terry Rozier's got to be up there too, right?
I'm sure he is up there. He's 18th. He's right behind Giannis. He's about 3.3 points per game behind Giannis, who's at 23.5. He's at 23.2. Jeremy Grant scoring 23 a game, the same as Jokic. Christian Wood, 24 points, 10 rebounds, and almost 2 blocks a game. I can't believe that the Pistons let him leave. But my point I'm making is just all these names you're seeing, other than maybe that I named Kevin Durant, they're all young guys. These guys are all guys that are still going to be in the NBA for a long, long time to come. Trae Young's been kind of almost single-handedly, it feels like, leading the Hawks so far this year, which, I mean, you could say that last year.
You're selling my man Hunter on that team, sure, and Cam Reddish.
They're playing well, but I just mean, he's the way he's scoring this year. Almost all of his shots have been unassisted. He's just kind of he's getting his own offense on his own is kind of more what I meant. But they're a team that I thought would excel this year to an extent. I figured they'd be in the playoffs, but I still just can't get over the Cavaliers. Andre Drummond has been having kind of a Renaissance man type of year. He's all of a sudden he's relevant.
So many
again.
Clips of JaVale McGee, doing like weird handle movements and doing like off balance layups and things like that. And I'm just like, there's no way this is the same guy that was just on the Los Angeles Lakers last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and JaVale's gotten a little bit better every year, and JaVale's always tried to do those moves. That's just how he's always ended up on Shaqtin' a Fool, because he always falls over, throws the ball out of bounds. And now he seems to be a little bit more under control. But I can't remember who it was. I was watching an interview. They play for the Cavaliers, and they said, well, our defense is just so much more confident and so much better because Andre Drummond and JaVale McGee are just so incredible at protecting the rim that, they don't even have to, they don't have to worry as much as in past years. And they're still really doing a lot of this without Kevin Love. And I kind of figured that if they were going to be competitive at all, that Kevin Love and Drummond would be the guys. And it seems like so far it's been Sexton and Garland. I mean, I think Garland only had 8 points last night.
Well, spoken, you're supposed to say that Sexland. That's how you refer to those two.
Sexland. There you go. I like that. It's the new backcourt in Cleveland.
Yep, there you go. But our buddy Austin Carr just checked in and said hey too. So shout out to our buddy Austin Carr. Austin Carr, Stuart Brookings. Sorry, and shout out.
I'm Austin Carr.
Wait,
I was going to say, did I just get here?
I'm Ron Burgundy.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
There you go.
Apparently, I just got here, everybody. No.
I mean, sometimes it does feel that way here on the show. But anyway, Austin, I do want to point out something that you brought up. I'm working on a piece for, offtheballnetwork.com that you can go and get all your sports needs. And shout out real quick just to Nothing But Net Radio, which you're listening to right now here on Dash Radio. Thank you for tuning in on your drive home. But Austin, on part of the piece that I'm working on, I referenced the Delete 8, which were the 8 teams that weren't invited to Orlando. And I just want to read some things off of you or to you based off of where they are in the standings right now. We talked about already that Atlanta is 5th in the East. Charlotte and Chicago are each 1 game back from the 8th seed behind Boston. Cleveland is 4th in the East. Golden State is a half a game back. As bad as they seem, they're only a half game back from the 8th seed right now. Minnesota is a half game back from the 8th seed. New York is 7th in the East. The only one of those Delete 8 teams that aren't anywhere in the picture is Detroit, right? Which we kind of expected coming into the season. They're the only team right now playing up to or down to where we, our expectations of them.
Yeah, that's a perfect, example of what I was talking about. It seems like half of the playoff teams are going to be different, at least as of right now than they were last year. And
I just lost my co-host. So anyway, we're about to the point now where we're going to wrap up here on the Breaking the Game show, which you can listen to every Monday and Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 3 p.m. Pacific. And, we're just going to be wrapping up here soon. And we just want to give the opportunity now for each one of us, my co-host Austin, just grace, my buddy Austin Carr just checked into the show literally this time. He did leave and come back. So maybe I saw into the future a little bit, Austin.
There you go.
But I just want to give you the opportunity now, man, to anything that you have in the works basketball related, where the people could find you and all that fun stuff.
You can find me at Austin Carr 10 on Twitter. I'm part of the Off the Ball Network with Steven and Chris and Mo and Stuart and then pretty much everybody you saw message in tonight. They're all a part of the network too. And you can get all of us there. I'm doing some research. I haven't been writing a whole lot lately because I've been working on a kind of a bigger project. I'm trying to get to a point where I can maybe one day create my own analytic. I'm trying to work on taking a math class, basically, to put it easily. And I've been reading a lot on analytics for drafting. So that's something that I'm getting pretty interested in. Apparently these guys at a couple of these websites I've been looking at are working on a way to actually, so there's almost no way to really tell if these guys are going to be stars or not, or like just how good they're going to be based on their college stats. So instead of trying to figure out what's one number that I can look at that says, okay, this guy's going to be a star or not, it just kind of they're working on more of like a range of, possible outcomes for college stars and incoming NFL or NBA rookies. And so I'm getting pretty interested in that. I'm just kind of trying to work on an evaluation system for the draft and see where that takes me. So that's what I got working on right now. And I am kind of trying to figure out a way to put that into a paper or, an article for the site. So hopefully we'll see that sometime here soon.
Absolutely. And well, as for me, I just told you guys earlier, I'm basically working on an article that covers some of the stuff that we talked about here on the show, which we had, Zach Ramey of the Off the Glass podcast, where you can go and you can find that anywhere that podcasts are available. Be sure to go and subscribe to his show, by the way. I'm kind of working on all the factors that we faced last year, this offseason, and kind of what we're seeing now, and basically boiling all that down to just one place where you can kind of read up on all that stuff. I actually found out on our buddy Chris LeBron show, he had Jelani Brown and Mo Murphy on the show as well. And they were talking a little bit about something that I was, already working on independently. Seth Partnow of The Athletic also wrote that last year, the first 50 games, the percentage of games that were decided by, at or more than 20 points was at about 7%, give or take a little bit. And this season already, we're already at an over 12%, margin of victory of 20 plus points, right? So he broke it down in percentages and kind of showed a graph that dates back all the way to 2003, which he admits is just kind of an arbitrary year that kind of sets in tone the modern NBA. Well, I alluded earlier to that, I calculated average margin of victory for the first week, and it kind of correlates to exactly what, Seth Partnow wrote on The Athletic. So I'm kind of coming up with my own stats and reasonings for that and compiling that into one article, which you can get at offtheballnetwork.com whenever it's up. It should be up by the time you're listening to this show. But, as for myself, you can follow me on Twitter at StephenBTG, which stands for Breaking the Game, the name of the show. For Austin, you can follow him on Twitter at AustinCar10. Please follow the show itself on Twitter and Instagram at BTG NBA Pod. You can subscribe to the Breaking the Game podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Please listen, share, rate, and review. And Austin, before we go, why don't you say something nice to the people?
Hey, thanks for listening in. As always, everybody, anybody that takes time out of their day to listen to us talk about basketball, it blows me away that you even care what I have to say at all. So thank you for listening. Robbie, your dad, Mo, Chris, everybody that messaged in, and said hello or had something to say to add to the show. Thank you. Zach, thanks for coming on. That was really fun. I'm glad we got to do that. So everybody, just as always, thank you for giving us your time.
All right. Well, as for my co-host, Austin Carr, for myself, for the Nothing But Net channel here on Dash Radio, for the offtheballnetwork.com, where you can go get all of your sports needs. We got a hand anywhere that you can find basketball. Just reach out and we'll grab you back. But we'll talk to you guys every Monday and Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific here on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. We'll catch up with you guys next time. Much love, everybody.
Have a